The wedding dress hung pristine white against the bedroom door, catching the morning sunlight that streamed through Sarah Thompson's childhood window. In just 4 hours, she would walk down the aisle to marry the love of her life, David Martinez. But right now, in the quiet sanctuary of her old room, she was drowning in a sea of cardboard boxes and forgotten memories. Her mother had asked her to clean out the attic before the ceremony, a final symbolic gesture of leaving the past behind. What was supposed to be a quick 30-minute task had stretched into 2 hours of rediscovering photo albums, school reports, and childhood treasures she'd forgotten existed. The attic was a museum of her life. There were dance recital programs from when she was 7, honor roll certificates from high school, and her college diploma in elementary education. Each item told a story of a life lived fully, but always with a shadow, the absence of the father who should have been there to witness these milestones. Sarah pulled down another dusty box labeled Mike's Military, 1991, in her mother's careful handwriting. Her father, Sergeant Mike Thompson, had died when she was 3 years old during Operation Desert Storm. At least that's what she'd been told her entire life. The official letter from the Department of Defense, framed and hanging in their living room, confirmed it. Killed in action, January 17, 1991. She'd grown up with stories about her father's heroism, his dedication to duty, and his love for his family. Her mother, Linda, had remarried when Sarah was 7 to a wonderful man named Robert, who became the father figure she'd needed. Robert had never tried to replace Mike's memory. Instead, he'd honored it, telling Sarah stories about the father she'd lost and making sure she knew how much Mike had loved her. But there had always been a hollow space in her heart, shaped like the father she'd never really known. She'd spent countless nights as a child staring at his photograph on her nightstand, wondering what his voice sounded like, what advice he would have given her, how different her life might have been if he'd come home from the war. The box was heavier than expected. Inside, beneath his folded dress uniform and a collection of military medals, Sarah found something that made her breath catch in her throat. It was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in her father's handwriting. For my beautiful daughter Sarah, to be opened on her wedding day. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the envelope. How was this possible? How could her father have written her a letter for her wedding day when he died when she was only 3? Her mother had never mentioned anything like this. In all the conversations about Mike, all the stories about his service and his love for his family, Linda had never once mentioned a letter. She sank onto her childhood bed, the envelope feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. The wedding was in 4 hours. Guests were already arriving from out of town. The photographer would be here soon to capture the getting ready moments. The florist was downstairs arranging centerpieces, but nothing else mattered except the words her father had somehow left for this exact moment. With careful fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded 2 pages of military stationery, covered in her father's neat handwriting. The date at the top read, January 15, 1991, 2 days before the mission. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home from the war and you're about to get married. I'm writing this letter in my tent in the Saudi Arabian desert, 2 days before what our commanding officers are calling a high-risk operation. The sand is blowing against the canvas walls, and I can hear the other soldiers talking quietly in their bunks, probably writing their own letters home. I don't know if I'll survive what's coming, but I know that if I don't, I want you to have these words on the most important day of your life. I've been staring at your photograph for the past hour, the one where you're wearing that little yellow dress with the sunflowers on it, the one your mother sent me last month. You're laughing in the picture, and your whole face lights up with joy. I've memorized every detail of that photograph because it reminds me what I'm fighting for. Right now, you're 3 years old and sleeping in your crib back home in Ohio. This morning, before I left for deployment, you grabbed my finger with your tiny hand and wouldn't let go. Your mother had to pry your fingers loose so I could leave. You looked at me with those big brown eyes, my eyes, and said, Daddy, stay. Those were the last words I heard you speak, and I've been carrying that moment with me every day since. I want you to know that even though I might not be there to walk you down the aisle, I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. I may not know the details of your life, but I know my daughter, and I know you've grown up to be strong, kind, and beautiful, just like your mother. I know you've probably faced challenges and heartbreak, moments of doubt and fear. I know there were times when you needed your daddy and I wasn't there. I'm sorry for that, sweetheart. I'm sorry for every scraped knee I didn't kiss, every nightmare I didn't chase away, every milestone I didn't celebrate. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She wiped her eyes and continued reading, her father's words painting a picture of a man who understood exactly what he was sacrificing. I need to tell you something that your mother doesn't know, something I've never told anyone. The mission we're about to undertake isn't just dangerous, it's essentially a suicide mission. We're going behind enemy lines to rescue a downed pilot, and the chances of all of us making it back are slim to none. I volunteered for this mission, Sarah, and I want you to understand why. 3 days ago, we received intelligence about a captured American pilot being held in an Iraqi compound. His name is Captain James Morrison, and he's 22 years old, just a kid, really, with a wife named Jennifer and a baby daughter named Emma back home in Texas. When I heard about his little girl, all I could think about was you. I thought about how Emma would grow up without her father if we didn't bring him home, and I couldn't bear the thought of another little girl experiencing that loss. So I volunteered, knowing I might not come home, because sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just a father who understands what it means to love a daughter more than life itself. If I can give Emma Morrison her father back, then maybe my sacrifice will mean something. Maybe it will balance the scales somehow. The other soldiers think I'm crazy for volunteering. They say I have too much to live for, too much to lose. But they don't understand that this is exactly why I have to go, because I know what it's like to love a little girl so much it physically hurts, and I can't stand by and let another father be taken from his daughter if there's something I can do about it. Sarah's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the letter. Her father had died trying to save another father. The irony was devastating and beautiful at the same time. But here's what I need you to know about love, my darling girl. Love isn't just about being present. Love is about the choices we make, the sacrifices we're willing to endure, and the legacy we leave behind. I may not be there to teach you how to drive, to scare away your first boyfriend, or to dance with you at your wedding, but my love for you will be there in every moment. When you're scared, remember that you carry the courage of generations of strong women and brave men in your blood. Your great-grandmother Thompson survived the Great Depression by sheer force of will. Your grandfather Thompson stormed the beaches of Normandy. Your grandmother Martinez came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. You come from a long line of fighters, Sarah, and that strength lives in you. When you're facing difficult decisions, remember that doing the right thing is often the hardest thing, but it's always worth it. There will be times in your life when you'll have to choose between what's easy and what's right. Choose right, even when it costs you something. Choose right, even when no one is watching. Choose right, because that's who you are. When you're doubting yourself, remember that you are loved beyond measure by a father who would choose you over his own life every single time. You are worthy of love, worthy of happiness, worthy of all the beautiful things this world has to offer. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. I hope the man you're marrying today understands what a treasure he's getting. I hope he loves you with the fierce protectiveness of a warrior and the gentle tenderness of a poet. I hope he makes you laugh until your sides hurt and holds you when you cry. Most importantly, I hope he sees in you what I see, a woman capable of changing the world with her kindness and strength. I've been thinking about what I would say to him if I could meet him, this man who gets to love my daughter. I would tell him that you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, even at 3 years old. I would tell him that you're stubborn like your mother and loyal like your father. I would tell him that you deserve to be cherished every single day, not just on special occasions. If you have children someday, tell them about their grandfather who loved them before they were even born. Tell them that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right even when you're terrified. Tell them that love is the only thing that truly lasts, the only thing that matters when everything else falls away. Tell them that their grandfather's greatest regret wasn't dying young, but missing the chance to know them. I want you to know about the dreams I had for you, sweetheart. I dreamed of teaching you how to throw a baseball and how to change a tire. I dreamed of helping you with your homework and driving you to soccer practice. I dreamed of meeting your friends and embarrassing you at school events. I dreamed of watching you graduate from high school and college, of walking you down the aisle, of holding my grandchildren. Those dreams won't come true the way I imagined them, but that doesn't mean they're lost forever. Every time you accomplish something amazing, I'll be there in spirit cheering you on. Every time you show kindness to someone who needs it, you'll be living out my dreams for you. Every time you choose love over fear, you'll be making me proud. I'm running out of space on this paper, but I could write you 1,000 letters and never run out of things to say. You are my heart walking around outside my body, my greatest achievement, my most precious gift. Being your father, even for just 3 years, has been the greatest honor of my life. I need you to promise me something, Sarah. Promise me you'll live boldly. Promise me you'll take chances and chase your dreams. Promise me you won't let fear hold you back from the life you're meant to live. Promise me you'll love deeply and forgive freely. Promise me you'll remember that you are enough, exactly as you are. Dance for me today, sweetheart. Laugh until you cry. Kiss your husband like it's the first and last time. Live boldly and love fearlessly. And know that somewhere, somehow, your daddy is watching and cheering you on. I love you more than all the stars in the sky, more than all the grains of sand on all the beaches, more than all the words in all the books ever written. You are my sunshine, my little girl, my everything. All my love, always and forever. Daddy P.S. There's something else in the box. Look for the small wooden jewelry box. It was my grandmother's, and I want you to have it for your wedding day. Inside, you'll find the locket I bought for your mother when you were born. I want you to wear it today, so a piece of our love story can be part of yours. Sarah was sobbing now, tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the letter. She carefully set it aside and searched through the box until she found a small, intricately carved wooden jewelry box she'd never seen before. The wood was dark with age, and the carving depicted roses and vines intertwined around the edges. Inside was a delicate gold locket, with a tiny photo of her father in his dress uniform, and next to it, an even tinier photo of 3-year-old Sarah sitting on his lap. But there was something else that made her gasp. A small folded piece of paper with "Read me second" written on it in her father's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the note. Sarah, if you found this box, it means you read my letter. I hope it brought you comfort instead of sadness. I have one more thing to tell you. Something I couldn't fit in the main letter. The night before I left for deployment, I had a dream about your wedding day. In the dream, I was there, walking you down the aisle in my dress uniform. You were wearing your grandmother's locket, and you were the most beautiful bride I'd ever seen. When I woke up, I knew it was more than just a dream. It was a promise. A promise that even if I couldn't be there in person, my love would be there with you. Wear the locket today and know that I'm keeping my promise. Love, Daddy. But there was something else in the box that made her heart stop completely. It was a military commendation letter, dated March 15, 1991, 2 months after her father was supposed to have died. The letter detailed how Sergeant Mike Thompson had successfully completed a rescue mission behind enemy lines, saving the life of Captain James Morrison, but had been severely wounded and listed as missing in action for several weeks before being found by Allied forces. The letter was signed by Colonel Patricia Hayes and included a recommendation for the Silver Star Medal for extraordinary heroism in combat. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note. Sergeant Thompson's actions saved not only Captain Morrison's life, but potentially the lives of Morrison's entire unit. His courage under fire exemplifies the highest traditions of military service. Sarah's mind reeled. If this letter was real, if her father had survived the mission, then why had they been told he was dead? Why had she grown up believing she was an orphan? Why had her mother remarried? Why had they held a memorial service? She searched through the box more frantically now and found more documents that didn't make sense. There was a medical report from a military hospital in Germany, dated February 1991, detailing extensive injuries sustained by Sergeant Michael Thompson, traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, severe burns, and what the doctors called acute stress reaction, what would later be known as PTSD. There was a psychiatric evaluation from April 1991 that painted a picture of a man struggling with severe depression, survivor's guilt, and an inability to function in normal social situations. The doctor's notes mentioned that the patient expresses feelings of unworthiness and believes his family would be better off without him. And then, at the bottom of the box, Sarah found something that made her blood run cold. It was a letter in her father's handwriting, but this one was addressed to her mother and dated May 15, 1991. Linda, I can't do this anymore. I can't be the man you married, and I can't be the father Sarah deserves. The war broke something in me that can't be fixed. I have nightmares every night. I can't hold my own daughter without having a panic attack. I see enemies in every shadow, hear gunfire in every loud noise. You and Sarah deserve better than a broken man who jumps at his own shadow and screams in his sleep. I'm going to disappear, Linda. I'm going to let you both believe I died in that desert, because in many ways, I did. The man you married didn't come home from Iraq. This shell of a person isn't worthy of your love or Sarah's future. Please don't look for me. Please let me go. Raise Sarah to remember the father who loved her, not the broken soldier who came back. Let her keep her hero. I'm sorry for everything. Mike. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and called her mother. Sarah, honey, you should be getting ready for the wedding. Linda's voice came through the speaker, warm and slightly frazzled. The photographer will be there in an hour and you haven't even started your makeup. Mum, I need you to come up to my room right now. I found something in Dad's military box. There was a long pause. Sarah, what kind of something? Just come up here, please. And, Mum, bring Robert with you. Sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound upset. Just come up here now. 5 minutes later, Linda Thompson Williams climbed the attic stairs with her husband Robert close behind. When Linda saw the letter in Sarah's hands and the contents of the military box spread across the bed, her face went completely white. Oh my God, Linda whispered. You found it. You knew about this letter? Linda sat down heavily on the bed beside her daughter, Robert standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. Your father gave it to me the night before he deployed. He made me promise to give it to you on your wedding day, but only if he didn't come home. But Mom, he did come home. Look at this. Sarah handed her the commendation letter and the medical reports. He survived the mission. He was wounded, but he survived. Why did you tell me he was dead? Linda's eyes filled with tears as she read the documents. Robert, who had been silent until now, sat down on Sarah's other side. Because he asked me to, Linda said quietly. What do you mean he asked you to? Linda took a shaky breath, and Robert squeezed her hand encouragingly. Your father did survive the mission, Sarah. He saved Captain Morrison's life, just like he wrote in the letter. But he was so severely injured that the doctors weren't sure he would ever be the same. He had traumatic brain injury, PTSD so severe he couldn't function, and physical injuries that left him partially paralyzed on his left side. So, you just told everyone he was dead? He told everyone he was dead, Linda corrected gently. When Mike finally came home 6 months later, he wasn't the man who had left. He couldn't sleep without nightmares. He couldn't be in crowds without panic attacks. He couldn't hold you without shaking. He was convinced that he was a danger to us, that his presence would ruin your childhood. Robert spoke up for the first time. I knew your father before the war, Sarah. We served together in the National Guard. Mike was the strongest, most confident man I'd ever met. When he came back, it was like looking at a ghost. Where is he now? Sarah asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Linda was quiet for a long moment. He's been living in a veterans facility in Colorado for the past 27 years. He's gotten better over the years, much better, but he's never felt worthy of coming back into your life. He's been following your achievements from a distance. He knows about your college graduation, your job, your engagement. He's so proud of you, Sarah, but he's terrified that if you knew the truth, it would ruin the image you have of him. You've been in contact with him this whole time? Not directly, Linda said, but Robert has. They exchange letters sometimes. Mike sends money when he can. He's been working at the facility, helping other veterans. He paid for part of your college tuition, Sarah. He wanted to contribute something to your life, even if he couldn't be part of it. Sarah looked at Robert with new eyes. You've known about this my entire life? Robert nodded. When your mother and I got married, she told me everything. I've been writing to Mike for 20 years, sending him pictures of you, telling him about your accomplishments. He has a scrapbook of your entire life, Sarah. Every school play, every honor roll certificate, every newspaper article about your teaching awards. Why didn't you tell me? Because Mike made us promise not to, Linda said. He was so ashamed of what the war had done to him, so convinced that he would be a burden to you. He said he wanted you to remember him as a hero, not as a broken man who couldn't even hold his own daughter without having a panic attack. Sarah felt like the world was spinning around her. Her father was alive. He'd been alive this entire time, living just a few states away, watching her grow up from the shadows, contributing to her life in ways she'd never known. I need to see him. Sarah, it's your wedding day. David is waiting for you. All your guests are here. The ceremony is in 3 hours. I need to see him, Sarah repeated more firmly this time. I need to see my father. Linda looked at her daughter's determined face and recognized the same stubborn courage that had driven Mike to volunteer for that dangerous mission 30 years ago. The facility is a 4-hour drive from here. Then we better get going. Sarah, think about this, Robert said gently. You can see him after your honeymoon. You can plan a proper reunion. Today is supposed to be about you and David. Today is supposed to be about love and family, Sarah corrected. And my father is family. David will understand. She pulled out her phone and called her fiancé. Hey, beautiful. David's voice was warm and excited. Are you getting nervous? I can't wait to see you in that dress. David, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. The tone of her voice must have alarmed him, because his response was immediate and serious. What's wrong? Are you okay? Sarah explained everything, the letter, the documents, the revelation that her father was alive. David listened without saying a word until she finished. So what do you want to do? He asked simply. I want to go see him. I want to bring him back for our wedding. Then let's go get him. David, you don't understand. It's a 4-hour drive each way. We'd have to postpone the ceremony. Sarah, the ceremony is just a party. The marriage is what matters, and I want to marry a woman who would drive across the country to reunite with her father. If we have to postpone, we postpone. If we have to move the whole thing to Colorado, we move it to Colorado. I don't care if we get married in a hospital chapel or a veterans facility cafeteria. I just want to marry you. Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. I love you so much. I love you too. Now go get your dad. An hour later, Sarah was in her car, still wearing her wedding dress, driving toward Colorado with her mother in the passenger seat and Robert following behind in his truck. She'd called the church and explained the situation to Pastor Williams, who had immediately offered to reschedule the ceremony for the evening. The wedding party had been confused but supportive, and David had taken charge of calling all the guests to explain the delay. The drive felt both eternal and instantaneous. Linda filled in more details about Mike's condition, his progress over the years, and the letters he'd written to Sarah but never sent. She told Sarah about the first Christmas after Mike had died, when Linda had found a package on their doorstep with no return address, a beautiful wooden rocking horse for Sarah, clearly handmade. Every year after that, there had been anonymous gifts, books, art supplies, a bicycle, always things that showed someone was paying attention to Sarah's interests and development. He never missed a birthday or Christmas, Linda said. Even when he was at his worst, struggling with his demons, he always made sure you had something from him, even if you didn't know it was from him. Robert's voice came through the car's Bluetooth system. He was following behind, and they'd connected their phones for the drive. Tell her about the college fund, he said. What college fund? Sarah asked. Linda sighed. When you were in high school and started talking about wanting to be a teacher, Mike got a job at the veterans facility. He worked in the kitchen, then in maintenance, then eventually became a counselor helping other veterans with PTSD. Every penny he earned, he sent to us for your college fund. He said education was the one gift he could still give you. You told me that money came from Dad's life insurance. Some of it did, but most of it came from Mike. He's been working for 27 years, Sarah, and almost every dollar he earned went toward your future. By the time they pulled into the parking lot of the Mountain View Veterans Facility, Sarah felt like she was about to meet a stranger, who was also the most important person in her world. The facility was beautiful, nestled in the Colorado mountains with gardens and walking paths. It looked more like a resort than a medical facility, Linda led Sarah to the main building, where they were greeted by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Mrs. Williams," the woman said, embracing Linda. "I'm so glad you called ahead. Mike is, well, he's terrified and excited and convinced this is all a dream. Sarah, this is Dr. Patricia Chen. She's been Mike's therapist for the past 15 years. Dr. Chen shook Sarah's hand. "Your father talks about you constantly. I feel like I've watched you grow up through his stories. He's going to be overwhelmed to see you, especially in your wedding dress." "How is he?" Sarah asked. "I mean, really, is he okay?" "He's remarkable," Dr. Chen said honestly. "When he first came here, he was barely functional. Severe PTSD, depression, survivor's guilt that was eating him alive. But he's done the work, Sarah. He's been in therapy for decades. He's helped hundreds of other veterans. And he's become one of our most valued staff members. He's not the broken man who left your family 30 years ago. But he's still here. He never came home. Because he's still convinced he doesn't deserve to. Mike has spent 30 years believing that the best thing he could do for you was stay away. It's going to take time for him to believe otherwise." Dr. Chen led them through the facility, pointing out the various programs and amenities. They passed a workshop where veterans were learning woodworking skills, a garden where others were growing vegetables, and a common room where a group was playing cards and laughing. "Mike runs our PTSD support group," Dr. Chen explained. "He also teaches woodworking. That's where all those anonymous gifts came from, by the way. He made every single one of them himself." They stopped outside a door marked Michael Thompson, peer counselor. "He has his own office?" Sarah asked. "He has his own apartment too," Dr. Chen said. "Mike isn't a patient anymore, Sarah. He's staff. He chooses to live here because this is where he feels he can do the most good, but he's free to leave any time he wants." Dr. Chen knocked on the door. "Mike, there's someone here to see you." "I told you, Pat, I'm not ready. I don't know what to say to her." Sarah's heart broke at the sound of her father's voice, older than she remembered, but unmistakably the same voice that had sung her lullabies when she was small. "Mike," Dr. Chen said gently, "she's here. She's standing right outside your door in her wedding dress, and she drove 4 hours to see you. Don't you think it's time?" There was a long silence, then the sound of footsteps. The door opened slowly, and Sarah found herself face to face with her father for the first time in 27 years. Mike Thompson was now 58 years old, his hair silver and his face lined with years of struggle and healing. He walked with a slight limp and had scars on his hands from his injuries, but his eyes, Sarah's eyes, were clear and bright. He was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, and Sarah could see the man he'd been before the war in his posture and bearing. When he looked up and saw Sarah standing in the doorway in her wedding dress, the book he'd been holding fell from his hands. "Sarah?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Hi, Daddy." For a moment, neither of them moved. Mike's eyes filled with tears as he took in the sight of his daughter, tall and beautiful, wearing a dress that made her look like a princess with his eyes and Linda's smile. "You're supposed to be getting married today." "I am getting married today. But first I needed to meet my father." Mike's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not the hero you thought I was, sweetheart. I'm just a broken old soldier who was too proud and too scared to be the father you deserved." Sarah crossed the room and took her father's scarred hands in hers. "You saved a man's life. You gave another little girl her father. You wrote me a letter that taught me more about love and courage than anything else ever could. You worked for 27 years to pay for my education. You sent me gifts every birthday and Christmas. You are exactly the hero I thought you were." Mike broke down then, 30 years of grief and shame and love pouring out of him as he held his daughter for the first time since she was 3 years old. "I've missed so much," he sobbed. "I've missed everything. Your first day of school, your first heartbreak, your graduation, your first job. I've missed your entire life." "You haven't missed everything," Sarah said, holding him tight. "You haven't missed the most important part. You haven't missed me becoming the woman you raised me to be through your letter, through your love, through your sacrifice." They talked for 2 hours in Mike's office, which was filled with photographs of Sarah that Robert had sent over the years. There were pictures from every stage of her life, school photos, graduation pictures, newspaper clippings about her teaching awards, even a photo from her engagement party that David had posted on social media. Mike told her about the mission in detail, how they'd infiltrated the Iraqi compound, how he'd found Captain Morrison barely alive, how they'd fought their way out under heavy fire. He told her about waking up in a German hospital weeks later, not remembering his own name, struggling to piece together what had happened. "The doctors said I might never fully recover," Mike said. "The brain injury affected my memory, my coordination, my ability to process emotions. I couldn't handle loud noises or crowds. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. When I finally remembered who I was and asked to go home, they told me it might be better if I didn't." "Who told you that?" "The military psychiatrist. He said I was too damaged to be around civilians, especially children. He said I might hurt you without meaning to, that my presence would traumatize you more than my absence." Sarah felt a surge of anger at the unknown doctor, who had convinced her father he was too broken to come home. That was wrong. That was so wrong. Maybe. But at the time, it felt like the truth. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without seeing a monster. How could I expect a 3-year-old to see anything different? Sarah told him about her life, her childhood with Robert, her education, her career as a teacher, her relationship with David. She told him about the nights she'd spent wondering about him, the Father's Day card she'd written but never sent, the way she'd always felt like something was missing. "I used to dream about you," she said. "I'd dream that you'd come home and explain everything, that there had been some mistake and you weren't really dead. I never stopped hoping, even when everyone told me I needed to let go." "I dreamed about you too," Mike said, "every night for 30 years. I dreamed about your first day of school, your first dance, your wedding day. I dreamed about all the moments I was missing." When it was time to leave, Sarah had a proposal. "I want you to come to my wedding. I want you to walk me down the aisle." Mike shook his head. "Sarah, I can't. I don't belong in your perfect day. You have Robert. He's been your father for 20 years. He's the one who earned the right to walk you down the aisle. My perfect day includes both of my fathers. Robert raised me and loved me, and I want him there too. But you're the one who gave me life, who taught me about courage and sacrifice through your letter, who worked for decades to provide for my future. I want you to walk me down the aisle." "I don't have anything to wear to a wedding." Linda smiled through her tears. "Your dress uniform is in the car. I brought it just in case." "You brought my uniform?" "I've kept it cleaned and pressed for 30 years, Linda said. "I always hoped that someday—" Mike looked at his ex-wife with wonder. "You kept it?" "I kept everything, Mike. Your medals, your letters, your photographs. I never stopped believing that someday you'd be ready to come home." Dr. Chen, who had been quietly observing the reunion, spoke up. "Mike, you've spent 30 years helping other veterans overcome their shame and reconnect with their families. Maybe it's time to take your own advice." Mike was quiet for a long moment, looking at his daughter in her wedding dress, at Linda, who had never stopped believing in him, at Robert, who had loved his family in his absence. "What about Captain Morrison?" he asked suddenly. "Did he make it home? Did his daughter get to grow up with her father?" Sarah smiled. "David looked him up while we were driving here. James Morrison retired from the Air Force as a colonel. He's been married to Jennifer for 32 years. Their daughter Emma is a doctor now, and she has 3 children of her own. He made it home, Dad. Because of you, he made it home." Mike closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them, Sarah saw a piece there that hadn't been there before. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll come to your wedding." 2 hours later, Mike Thompson stood in the bathroom of the Veterans Facility, looking at himself in the mirror while wearing his dress uniform for the first time in 30 years. The uniform still fit, though it was a little loose in places where age had taken its toll. His medals gleamed on his chest, including the silver star he'd never known he'd received. Dr. Chen knocked on the door. "Mike, how are you doing in there?" "I'm terrified," he admitted. "That's normal. You're about to walk your daughter down the aisle. Every father is terrified on his daughter's wedding day. What if I have a panic attack? What if I can't handle the crowd? Then we'll deal with it. But Mike, you've been in crowds before. You speak to groups of veterans every week. You've been preparing for this moment your whole life, even if you didn't know it." When Mike emerged from the bathroom, Sarah was waiting for him in the hallway. She had touched up her makeup and fixed her hair, and she looked radiant. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. "You look pretty handsome yourself, Sergeant Thompson." They drove back to Ohio in a convoy, Sarah and Mike in one car, Linda and Robert in another, and Dr. Chen following behind in her own vehicle. She had insisted on coming to provide support if Mike needed it. During the drive, Mike told Sarah more stories about her early childhood, memories she'd been too young to retain. He told her about the songs he used to sing to her, the books he'd read to her, the way she used to fall asleep on his chest while he watched television. "You were such a happy baby," he said. "You laughed at everything. You had this giggle that could light up a room. When I was in the desert, missing you, I used to close my eyes and try to remember that laugh." "I still laugh a lot," Sarah said. "David says it's one of the things he loves most about me." "Tell me about David. What's he like?" Sarah's face lit up as she talked about her fiancé. "He's kind and funny and patient. He works with veterans organizations, actually. He helps them transition back to civilian life, find jobs, deal with PTSD. I think you'd really like him." "He works with veterans." "He started the program after his own father came back from Afghanistan with PTSD. He understands what families go through when someone they love is struggling with trauma." Mike was quiet for a moment. Maybe this isn't a coincidence. Maybe this is exactly how it was supposed to happen. When they arrived at the church, it was nearly evening. The parking lot was full of cars. All the wedding guests had waited. As they pulled up to the front entrance, Sarah could see David standing on the steps in his tuxedo, looking anxious and excited. When David saw Mike get out of the car in his dress uniform, his face broke into a huge smile. He walked over and extended his hand. "Sergeant Thompson, I'm David Martinez. I'm honored to meet you, sir." Mike shook his future son-in-law's hand, studying his face. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for raising an incredible woman. And thank you for your service." The church was packed. Word had spread through the small town about Mike's return, and people who hadn't been invited to the original wedding had come just to witness the reunion. When Mike walked into the church, there was an audible gasp from the congregation. Many of them had known him before the war, had attended his memorial service, had comforted Linda in her grief. Pastor Williams, who had officiated at Mike's memorial service 30 years earlier, approached with tears in his eyes. "Mike Thompson," he said, embracing him. "Welcome home, son, welcome home." The ceremony was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. Sarah walked down the aisle flanked by two fathers, Robert on her right, the man who had raised her and loved her as his own, and Mike on her left. The father she'd thought was dead, wearing his dress uniform with his medals gleaming in the candlelight. The congregation was openly weeping. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as they watched this impossible reunion, this family made whole again after 30 years of separation. When they reached the altar, both men kissed Sarah's cheek. Robert took his seat in the front row next to Linda, but Mike remained standing. "Before we begin," Mike said, his voice carrying clearly through the church, "I need to say something." Pastor Williams nodded, and Mike turned to face the congregation. 30 years ago, I made a choice to disappear from my daughter's life because I thought I was protecting her from my brokenness. I was wrong. I robbed her of a father and robbed myself of watching the most amazing woman in the world grow up. But Sarah has taught me today that love isn't about being perfect. Love is about showing up, even when you're scared, even when you're broken, even when you think you're not worthy. He turned to David. "You're getting an extraordinary woman, son. She has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, the courage of a warrior, and the wisdom to forgive even when forgiveness seems impossible. Love her fiercely, protect her always, and never make the mistake I made of thinking you're not good enough for her love." Then he looked at Robert. "And thank you, Robert, for being the father I couldn't be. Thank you for loving my daughter and my wife when I was too broken to do it myself. You are a better man than I ever was." Finally, he looked at Linda. "And Linda, thank you for keeping the faith. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." Then he took his seat next to Robert, and the ceremony began. Sarah and David exchanged vows that spoke of love that endures through separation, forgiveness that heals old wounds, and the courage to build a future while honoring the past. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the entire congregation erupted in applause and tears. At the reception, Mike gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. He talked about the letter he'd written 30 years ago, about the mission that had changed his life, and about the daughter who had taught him that it's never too late for redemption. "I thought I was saving Captain Morrison for his daughter," Mike said, his voice strong and clear. "But really, I was saving him for this moment, for the chance to see my own daughter become the woman she was meant to be. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the greatest sacrifices, and sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be." He told the story of the mission, of finding Morrison barely alive in that Iraqi compound, of fighting their way out under heavy fire. He talked about the months of recovery, the years of struggle, and the slow journey back to wholeness. "I spent 30 years believing I was too broken to be part of my daughter's life," he said. "But Sarah taught me today that we're all broken in some way, and that's okay. What matters is how we choose to heal, how we choose to love, and how we choose to show up for the people who matter most." As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself dancing with her father to "The Way You Look Tonight," the song he'd hummed to her as a baby, the song Linda had told her about, but she'd never heard him sing. "I have something for you," Mike said as the song ended. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound journal. "These are all the letters I wrote to you over the years but never sent. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I missed. I want you to have them." Sarah hugged the journal to her chest. "Thank you, Daddy." "No, sweetheart, thank you. You gave me back my life today. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my family." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Are you going to come home? Are you going to stay in Colorado?" Mike looked around the reception hall, at Linda dancing with Robert, at David talking with Dr. Chen about veterans programs, at all the people who had welcomed him back with open arms. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for me to come home." As Sarah and David drove away from the reception toward their honeymoon, Sarah thought about the letter that had started it all. Her father had written about love being the only thing that truly lasts, about courage being the willingness to do what's right, even when you're terrified. He'd been right about everything. 6 months later, Mike moved back to Ohio. He bought a small house just a few miles from Sarah and David, close enough to be part of their lives but far enough to give them space to build their marriage. He started working at the local VA hospital, using his experience to help other veterans deal with PTSD and trauma. The transition wasn't always easy. Mike still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with crowds and loud noises. But he was no longer alone in his struggle. He had family around him, people who understood that healing is a process, not a destination. Linda and Robert helped him settle into his new home. Robert, who had spent 20 years loving Mike's family in his absence, became one of his closest friends. They worked together on veterans advocacy projects, and Robert often said that having Mike back made their family complete in a way he'd never expected. When Sarah and David's first child was born, a daughter they named Hope, Mike was in the delivery room, holding his granddaughter and crying tears of joy. He'd missed 30 years of Sarah's life, but he wasn't going to miss a moment of Hope's. The letter that Sarah had found on her wedding day was framed and hung in their nursery, a reminder that love transcends time and distance, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most painful beginnings. Mike started a support group for families of veterans, helping them understand that PTSD doesn't just affect the soldier. It affects everyone who loves them. He and Linda spoke at conferences about the importance of not giving up on loved ones who are struggling, about the power of unconditional love and patient faith. Captain James Morrison, the pilot Mike had saved 30 years earlier, came to visit when he heard about Mike's return. The two men spent hours talking about that night in the Iraqi desert, about the choices they'd made and the lives they'd built afterward. Morrison's daughter Emma, now Dr. Emma Morrison Clark, brought her own children to meet the man who had given her back her father. "I've thought about you every day for 30 years, Morrison told Mike. "I named my son after you, Michael Morrison. He's a teacher now, just like Sarah. I think you'd be proud." Every night as Mike tucked his granddaughter into bed, he would whisper the same words he'd once whispered to Sarah. "Grandpa loves you, little one, always and forever." The mission that had nearly destroyed him had ultimately saved him. The letter he'd written in desperation had become a bridge back to the life he'd thought he'd lost forever. And the daughter he'd tried to protect by disappearing had protected him instead, with a love strong enough to heal 30 years of wounds. On the first anniversary of Sarah's wedding, the family gathered at Mike's house for dinner. As they sat around the table, Mike and Linda and Robert, Sarah and David and baby Hope, Dr. Chen, who had become like family, and even Captain Morrison and his wife, who had driven in from Texas, Mike raised his glass. "A year ago, I was convinced I was too broken to be part of this family," he said. "But you all taught me that family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about forgiveness and second chances and love that never gives up." He looked at Sarah, who was holding Hope in her arms. "My daughter taught me that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the battles we fight, but from the courage to come home." Sarah smiled at her father, the man who had written her a letter from a desert 30 years ago, the man who had saved another father so that another little girl could grow up whole, the man who had finally learned that he was worthy of the love he'd always given so freely. "Welcome home, Daddy," she said. "Welcome home." And for the first time in 30 years, Mike Thompson was truly, completely home.